What is it that makes Souls-like games so enjoyable for many players, myself included? Besides the sense of accomplishment you get by the lack of hand-holding in high difficulty level, there are many other factors that come into play. The often haunting and mysterious atmosphere, the top-tier music, voice acting and bosses. As well as the well-designed and satisfying combat systems, and so much more shape a Souls-like into a potentially unforgettable experience. The best of the best Souls games excel at each and every one of these points, while other studios fail to deliver a compelling Souls-like experience by severely lacking one or more of these components. Let's talk about why a Souls-like set in the twisted dark world of Pinocchio is exactly what the genre needed. When you take a look at these recordings, what do you see? Hauntingly atmospheric landscapes, marked by ruin and grandeur, would be my take. There's just something about From Software's world creations and environmental storytelling that rightfully makes them the unparalleled studio in the Souls and Souls-like genre. Now if I were to take a look at this and someone told me that's footage from a From Software game, I would probably believe them. And I mean this in the best way possible, as it shows the high quality production of this game. What Round 8 Studio and newest games have done here is much more than simply rip off the fascinating From Software vibes. And I think this will become clearer and clearer as we get further into the video. Lies of P's story starts shortly after the Puppet Frenzy event happened, making all the puppets in Krat go mad and attacking every living thing around town. Pinocchio is woken up by Sofia, who wants him to stop the puppet frenzy with his creator, Geppetto, the most famous puppet maker in Krat. The developers chose a great and refreshing setting, and made full use of its potential to create hauntingly beautiful landscapes with great environmental storytelling. The phenomenal music absolutely amplifies the atmosphere in this game, and is honestly on FromSoft's level. The city of Krat is dark, somber and gloomy, and is filled with a variety of different locations. The design of the world and the enemies highlights the devastation that has befallen the city, and it's fascinating to explore and observe the detailed designs of the profound cities, magnificent cathedrals, and lofty mines. When you think about it, the eerie and mystical aspects of Pinocchio's world, filled with strange creatures and ominous scenarios, are actually a natural fit for the atmospheric and dark aesthetic of Souls-like games, and the finished product is proof of this. Now, another aspect that makes this game so popular right now is its combat and weapon crafting system. The combat has crisp, impactful, and badass sound effects. I mean, take a listen. All enemies have their own specific advantages and disadvantages, so it makes little sense to attack them all in the same way. Something that Bloodborne players will probably notice right away. There actually is a health regen system as well in this game. Basically it works like this. If you perform a standard block, you take reduced damage and can recover your hit points by successfully hitting the enemy multiple times. But it goes further than this. You can also inflict a lot of stagger damage and overpower an enemy if you perform a perfect guard. These will require excellent timing and knowledge of your enemy's moveset, but this way you have no HP loss and you build up the non-visible stagger meter on your enemy. Once that meter is full, you can inflict a ton of stagger damage. A perfect block can sometimes even break your enemy's weapon, so there is a high risk, high reward scenario. What goes hand in hand with the combat is the weapon customization system. Every weapon consists of two parts. The top part, which would be the blade of your weapon, and the lower part, that is your hilt, or in other words, the handle of your weapon. You can freely mix and match them together to create insanely satisfying weapons. Some will be extremely effective, while others will perhaps not be so practical. But the fun part is experimenting, and the freedom the game provides you in choosing your playstyle. The offensive variety you have in this game is truly impressive. Both the blade and hilt of a weapon also have a weapon skill called fable arts that are similar to the Ashes of War in Elden Ring. You can freely mix and match them as well for cool combinations. There is also another cool thing called Legion Arms. That's a special equipment used by Pinocchio in combat. and could be compared to the prosthetic tools in Sekiro. This Legion arm is a prosthetic arm that provides Pinocchio with special moves that he can use during fights. They act as an extra attack, separate from your chosen weapon, and therefore add more depth to the combat system and more possibilities in how you approach fights. Another part where Lies of P stands out is when it comes to how the story is delivered. The developers have chosen a different and more straightforward route here than its FromSoft competitors. Lies of P is based on the story of Pinocchio, and it's set in a city that's certainly seen better days, thanks to those rampaging puppets and a nasty plague. Our main character, P, is on a mission to find Geppetto, the creator of all the puppets who's gone missing. What's pretty cool is that the story in Lies of P is straightforward and much easier to digest than games by From Software that often leave you guessing. Here, you get cutscenes and dialogues that make the story easy to follow, but there's still plenty of mysteries to discover as you dive deeper into the game. The game also has a hub, the Hotel Krat, where you get to learn more about the world and what your next steps are. So basically the Lies of P version of the Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 3. At this point, I absolutely have to mention the top tier voice acting in this game, as you can hear for yourself in these examples.
Geppetto will have answers, but we have to find him first. He was last seen on Elysian Boulevard.
I didn't know anyone was alive out here. I know what you're thinking, but I'm not a burglar. I'm just crashing in an abandoned house for a while.
The characters in the game react to what you do, making the story feel more alive. So you're not just fighting your way through, you're also unraveling a tale that's clear, engaging and also full of surprises. Since the more contextual, cohesive story is easy to follow, players who didn't like the cryptic storytelling in other Souls games will definitely appreciate this approach. A game about Pinocchio is of course pretty much legally required to give the player the possibility to lie. In the city, we encounter not just foes, but also various individuals we have the opportunity to assist. This is where the lying mechanic gets interesting. We have the option to deceive them, aka lie to them, to meet our objectives. These deceptions influence the progression of the story and can result in one of the 3 distinct game endings. Now let's jump into the heart of all Souls games. Lies of P has a lot of brilliantly designed and at times extremely difficult but also rewarding and epic boss battles. Their design fits the world perfectly, and you don't get the feeling that they're just put there for the sake of it. Now, as we talk about these bosses, this is also where some of the game's few criticism comes from. While it is true that the majority of the boss fights are a lot of fun to fight, the fact that at a certain point most bosses have 2 phases, aka 2 separate health bars, can make things a little frustrating, especially since Lies of P went the Dark Souls route and isn't afraid to force the player to run a pretty lengthy way back to the boss. Now, not only do you have to make your way back to the boss, but you also have to replay the first boss phase, even though you just want to learn the second boss phase, because chances are you mastered the first boss phase already, but keep dying to the second one, which can make things a little frustrating and tedious. Speaking about frustration, there also seems to be some balancing issues when it comes to boss difficulties, as difficulty spikes seem to appear seemingly random. Pair the already difficult fights with weapon durability, which in this game is a core mechanic that can't be as easily ignored as in Bloodborne for example, and you get a really tough game that punishes players and isn't afraid to let even experienced Souls players take 20 or 30 attempts at the harder bosses. What's pretty interesting is that the developers mentioned that Lies of P is a great Souls-like for beginners. But I would actually strongly disagree with this statement. The difficulty is even further amplified by the fact that you have no way to ask other players for help. You do get the option to summon a spectre, and while it is of great help, it usually won't survive the first boss phase if you use it as cannon fodder. Now, the good part is that these difficulty imbalances can easily be addressed with balanced patches, and seeing that the developers have already shared that they have future plans, that is very likely to happen. Before we close this video, I want to mention another thing that deserves to get positively addressed. Lies of P has great performance on all platforms, and that is really not to be taken as granted. The fact that this game is instantly playable at release, without having to wait weeks or potentially months for the developers to put out some performance patches, is probably also a reason why Lies of P was a day one purchase for many. All in all guys, this is probably the best Souls-like to come out in recent years, and despite its current problems with uneven difficulty, I think it's definitely worth checking out, especially since it's available on Game Pass as well. As always, I would love to see your opinion on the game in the comments, and if this video was helpful, please consider leaving a like, as it does help me out a ton. I'll see you next time.